The most terrible spirit you never invoke. Inner light, esoteric wisdom. For the soul's ascent offers a contemplative sanctuary for unveiling the hidden teachings that have inspired mystics, seekers, and sages across the centuries. Within these pages, embark upon a profound journey into the deepest layers of spiritual knowledge and esoteric understanding. What follows is not simply an exploration of history, nor merely the retelling of old legends, but a contemplative passage into the living current of esotericism embodied on every continent and in every age. Throughout human history, there has been a restless desire to pierce the veil of the unknown, to touch the divine fire that burns just beyond reach. In every culture, in every epoch, seekers have attempted to cross thresholds barred by tradition, religion, or fear. And in every tradition, there are warnings. Do not call upon certain names, do not open certain doors, and above all, never summon those spirits whose nature is destruction, deception, and despair. The allure of forbidden rites is precisely in their danger. They promise contact with forces that lie outside the ordinary human experience. They whisper of hidden knowledge, wealth, power, love, and even immortality, but in truth, they are a poisoned chalice. For what they offer comes at a cost. Sometimes one's health, sometimes one's sanity, and often one's very soul. Ancient grimoires and modern occult accounts alike are filled with stories of practitioners who began with curiosity but ended in ruin. This exploration is not a manual for ritual practice. It is a warning. What follows are some of the most perilous rites and entities ever described in occult history. Invocations that tear at the fabric of the self, spirits that delight in human weakness, and ceremonies that promise light but deliver only darkness. These are not tales to encourage imitation. They are cautionary signposts marking the edge of the abyss. For among the many mysteries of the esoteric tradition, there is one truth that must be remembered. The most terrible spirit is the one you should never invoke. The Headless Rite, Bornless Ritual. Among the most enigmatic and controversial rituals in Western occultism is what is known as the Headless Rite, or more commonly, the Bornless Ritual. Its roots can be traced to the Greek magical papyri, a collection of spells and invocations compiled in Egypt between the 2nd century BCE and the 5th century CE. In this ancient compendium, we find a striking invocation, a prayer to a mysterious, headless god. The text itself is hypnotic and commanding. It calls upon an authority that transcends the gods, a force without name or form. When Aleister Crowley rediscovered and adapted it in the early to 20th century, he elevated the Bornless Ritual to a central place within his thelemic system. Crowley believed the rite was a powerful means of attaining union with the holy guardian angel, the higher self, the divine spark within each person. Performed correctly, the rite is said to dissolve the barriers between the human practitioner and their spiritual essence. But herein lies the danger. The ritual is a direct confrontation with the deepest layers of consciousness. It strips away the masks of identity and forces the magician into a raw, unmediated encounter with the divine fire. Accounts of those who have attempted the Headless Rite without preparation speak of disorientation, hallucinations, or a sense of being torn apart from within. The repeated invocations, grand, commanding, absolute, can create a psychological intensity that borders on mania. For those without the grounding of years of study, the rite can lead to psychic fragmentation, paranoia, and even breakdown. Why is it dangerous? Because the ritual is not a prayer to a god, but an invocation that claims divine authority for oneself. To proclaim, "I am he, the Headless One," is to assume a role that can crush the unprepared. Without spiritual maturity, the self cannot withstand the burden of such identification. Rather than enlightenment, the result is madness. Even Crowley, who recommended the ritual, warned that it should only be attempted by those who had undergone deep purification and training. The true peril of the Headless Rite is that it is deceptively simple to read, but immensely complex to perform. To call upon the nameless fire is to risk being consumed by it. Thus, the Headless Rite stands as one of the earliest and most potent warnings. Not all doors should be opened, and not all lights are safe to approach. To stand before the Headless God is to gamble with one's very being, and many who have attempted it have discovered that the cost is far higher than they imagined. The Choronzon Ritual. In the labyrinth of Western esotericism, few names inspire as much unease as Choronzon. Unlike the orderly angels of Enochian magic or the structured demons of the Gotia, Choronzon resists all classification. He is described as the dweller in the abyss, the embodiment of chaos, dispersion, and annihilation. To summon Choronzon is not to meet a spirit with a face and a will, but to confront the terrifying possibility of dissolution itself. Origins in Enochian tradition. The roots of Choronzon can be traced back to the mystical experiments of Dr. John Dee and his medium Edward Kelly in the late 16th century. Working through crystal gazing and angelic dictation, Dee recorded the so-called Enochian system, a vast body of spiritual knowledge said to be dictated by angels. These revelations included complex calls or keys designed to open gateways into higher and lower planes of existence. Within this visionary framework, Choronzon emerges not as a specific demon, but as the living principle of the abyss, the chaotic void that separates the mundane world from the supernal realms of divine light. In Enochian cosmology, the abyss must be crossed by the advanced adept. But Choronzon waits there, testing all who dare approach. He is described as the voice of madness, the deceiver, the disperser of thought into meaningless fragments. Crowley in the desert. It is Aleister Crowley who gave Choronzon his most infamous reputation. In 1909, in the Algerian desert, Crowley and his assistant Victor Neuburg attempted what is now known as the Choronzon working. Through Enochian invocations, they sought to confront and bind Choronzon within a protective circle. The account, recorded in Crowley's The Vision and the Voice, reads like a fever dream. Choronzon appeared not in a stable form, but as a shifting nightmare, sometimes seductive, sometimes monstrous, sometimes a disembodied storm of words. At one point, he seemed to escape the circle, attacking Neuburg physically. Crowley claimed the circle held firm, but the ordeal was violent and nearly fatal. In the end, Choronzon dissolved back into the desert sands, leaving both men shaken to the core. For Crowley, this confrontation symbolized the essential trial of the magician. To cross the abyss, the ego must be utterly annihilated, stripped of illusion, scattered like dust. But where Crowley saw a necessary initiatory ordeal, others saw only madness courting madness, the nature of the abyss. Why is the ritual so dangerous? Because to invoke Choronzon is to deliberately enter the realm of psychic disintegration. Choronzon does not grant wealth, power, or even knowledge. He offers only dissolution. His gift is the destruction of the false self, but without preparation, this destruction becomes indistinguishable from psychosis. Practitioners who have attempted to repeat Crowley's experiment often report hallucinations, night terrors, and lingering paranoia. Choronzon's essence is not contained in a single form. It is the shifting instability of the human mind under pressure. To summon him is to break the boundaries of perception, to invite the collapse of meaning itself. In psychological terms, one could say Choronzon is the archetype of the shadow unbound. He embodies all the repressed fears, contradictions, and desires within the magician. To face him without adequate preparation is to drown in one's own unconscious. Unlike a demon who can be commanded by seal and name, Choronzon cannot truly be mastered, only endured, only passed through. The illusion of control. This makes the Choronzon ritual one of the most perilous undertakings in the occult canon. The magician may believe he is standing within a circle of protection, calling forth an external entity. In truth, the circle may only be a fragile illusion. Choronzon slips between the cracks of language, appearing wherever there is weakness. He thrives on doubt and dispersion. To hear his voice is to risk being torn apart by contradiction, seduced into meaninglessness, shattered into fragments of thought. Thus, the Choronzon ritual is less an invocation and more a confrontation with the abyss of the self. Crowley himself warned that only the most advanced adepts should attempt it, and even then, success does not mean survival in the ordinary sense. Success means the death of the ego, the annihilation of the personality, and the crossing into a state of consciousness that few can comprehend. The dweller never sleeps. In the lore that has grown since Crowley's desert ordeal, Choronzon has become almost a mythic figure, a demon of pure chaos, invoked in whispered tones by those fascinated with the edge of madness. Yet the truth remains. He is not a singular spirit to be invoked lightly, but the living presence of the abyss itself. He is always there, waiting at the threshold of the human mind, eager to swallow the reckless who mistake curiosity for strength. And so the warnings ring clear. Choronzon is not an ally, not a teacher, not even truly an enemy. He is the storm of dissolution itself. To invoke him is to invite the destruction of self. Few who have tried have emerged whole. For this reason, among the catalogues of dangerous rituals, the Choronzon working holds a unique and terrible place. It is not merely a pact with a demon. It is a deliberate act of self-annihilation. Those who summon Choronzon court not power, but madness. The invocation of the Qliphoth. Beyond the abyss, beyond Choronzon's fracturing presence, lies a domain whispered in the darker recesses of Kabbalistic and Hermetic lore. The realm of the Qliphoth. Often translated as shells or husks, the Qliphoth are the inverted, shadowed reflections of the Sephiroth, the spheres of divine emanation that compose the Tree of Life. Where the Sephiroth represent light, order, and harmony, the Qliphoth are chaos, distortion, and unbridled desire. To invoke the Qliphoth is to engage with the mirror of corruption. Each Qliphotic sphere corresponds to a spiritual imbalance, a perversion of divine principle. The scholar or magician who studies these spheres finds themselves facing archetypal energies that embody the very antithesis of their spiritual aspiration. Lilith, for example, is often associated with the husk of Bina, the dark feminine, and embodies desire, independence, and fury. Her invocation is said to awaken ungovernable passions, challenging the magician's control over their own instincts. Qliphoth, linked with Chesed's shadow, represents cruelty masked as generosity, teaching through harsh lessons that few can endure without psychological harm. Satariel, the Qliphoth of Kita's husk, embodies the veil of nothingness, a direct confrontation with the dissolution of purpose and self. The danger of these invocations is multi-layered. On the physical plane, tradition warns of nightmares, disease, or even sudden accidents, consequences attributed to the spirit's power to manipulate unseen forces. On the psychological plane, the effect is even more profound. Exposure to the Qliphoth is said to strip away comfort, delusion, and egoic protection, leaving the magician vulnerable to obsession, despair, and madness. Historically, accounts of Qliphotic engagement are rare, precisely because of this danger. Kabbalistic mystics treated these energies as a map of caution, a theoretical warning, rather than a practical guide. Only the most disciplined initiates, often guided by angelic protection or strict ritual preparation, could contemplate approaching these dark husks. Crowley and other modern occultists sometimes flirted with Qliphotic concepts in their writings, yet even they emphasized extreme caution, acknowledging the power of these inverted energies to overwhelm the unprepared. In ceremonial practice, invocation typically involves complex sigils, recitation of divine names, and the construction of sacred space. Yet no amount of technique can substitute for the practitioner's inner fortitude. The Qliphoth are not spirits to be ordered or bargained with. They are forces to be endured and understood. To confront them is to confront the shadow within oneself, all fear, pride, lust, and despair concentrated into a singular, intelligent opposition. There is also a subtle lesson. The Qliphoth exist as a reminder that true esoteric mastery does not consist of domination over spirits or the acquisition of power alone. It requires balance, discernment, and an intimate understanding of the self. Those who rush toward the Qliphoth seeking shortcuts into power or knowledge invariably find that the shadows they encounter are not external but internal, magnified by ritual and expectation. Perhaps the greatest horror of the Qliphoth lies in their invisibility. Unlike demons who may take forms, speak, or strike, the Qliphoth act through reflection and subtle corruption. They turn virtue into vice, clarity into confusion, and spiritual hunger into obsession. The magician may feel empowered, yet every step closer to the Qliphoth risks loss of self, leaving only a husk, a vessel for energies beyond comprehension. It is this very principle that the most terrible forces are those which mirror our own internal darkness that permeates all esoteric warnings. The Qliphoth teach that the path of ascent is inseparable from the confrontation with shadow, and that attempting to shortcut this confrontation can result in spiritual disintegration. The invocation of the Qliphoth, therefore, is a threshold few should dare approach. It is a ritual of awareness, endurance, and extreme discipline, not a tool for power. The practitioners who documented these rites did so primarily as cautionary records, lessons for the next generation about the boundaries of human ambition in the realm of the unseen. Ultimately, the Qliphoth remind us that some knowledge is dangerous not because it is forbidden, but because it is reflective of forces we are unprepared to bear. To invoke them without preparation is to invite chaos into the soul, to awaken shadows that may consume one's very essence. They are the mirrors of our deepest failings, and like Choronzon, they demand humility, reverence, and respect. Lucifuge Rofocale, the treasury of darkness. In the shadowed corridors of ceremonial magic, few names evoke as much fear and fascination as Lucifuge Rofocale. Unlike spirits whose influence is widely known, Lucifuge is a figure whispered about in the deeper layers of French and European grimoires, particularly in the Grand Grimoire. He is described as the minister of hell, the warden of infernal treasures, and the intermediary through whom worldly desires can be granted, at a price that is almost always hidden until it is too late. Lucifuge Rofocale is not a spirit to be commanded lightly. Where Gothic demons may be invoked with strict ritual formulas, Lucifuge's domain is subtle, insidious, and complex. He governs wealth, influence, and material power, but he does so with cunning. Legends insist that he will grant favors only to those who are willing to surrender moral grounding, personal integrity, or spiritual safety. To seek him casually is to court disaster. To bargain with him without preparation is to bind oneself to a force whose comprehension exceeds the human mind. The rituals associated with Lucifuge are deeply codified. The practitioner must prepare a circle, employ consecrated tools, recite names of power, and present offerings. Some texts describe the use of blood, incense, and precise timing, all designed to align the magician's will with the hidden currents of infernal authority. Yet even with meticulous adherence, there is no guarantee of safety. Unlike angels, who act in alignment with higher law, Lucifuge is a servant of the infernal order, and his compliance is always conditional. Historical accounts and grimoire warnings emphasize that he can provide what is asked: wealth, influence, or even secret knowledge. But the consequences are rarely visible at the moment of the pact. In some cases, stories recount sudden misfortune, striking the practitioner after a request was granted, illustrating the principle that no transaction with infernal forces is without cost. Families have been haunted for generations by the bargains struck by a single ambitious member, a caution repeated throughout occult tradition. Psychologically, the invocation of Lucifuge Rofocale is perilous. He operates on desire, ambition, and greed, the very traits that make a human susceptible to corruption. By engaging with him, the practitioner risks not only external consequences, but internal distortion, the erosion of empathy, the temptation toward cruelty, and the obsession with power. In this sense, Lucifuge embodies both the literal and symbolic cost of unchecked ambition. Modern occultists sometimes interpret Lucifuge as an archetype of shadow desire, the aspect of the psyche that craves material and personal gain without moral restraint. In this framework, his rituals serve as psychic mirrors, revealing the hidden motivations and impulses that practitioners may prefer to ignore. The risk lies in failing to confront these forces consciously. Without awareness and discipline, the invocation does not remain symbolic, but becomes a conduit for obsession, compulsion, or ruin. Even within Crowley's writings, Lucifuge is approached with caution. He appears not merely as a demon of wealth, but as a test of the magician's ability to wield desire responsibly. To summon him successfully, the practitioner must demonstrate clarity, purpose, and the capacity to endure temptation without succumbing. Without such fortitude, Lucifuge Rofocale's energies can overwhelm, corrupt, and consume. In broader esoteric terms, the figure of Lucifuge serves as a reminder that power without preparation is perilous. The spirits of darkness, unlike angels of guidance, offer results that are immediate and seductive, but conceal consequences that unfold across time and psyche. Lucifuge's realm is one of hidden costs, illustrating the central esoteric principle that knowledge and power must always be balanced with discipline, moral insight, and spiritual maturity. In the end, to invoke Lucifuge Rofocale is to walk a razor's edge. He is both an opportunity and a warning, a force that can grant what the human heart desires most, while simultaneously exposing the practitioner to the deepest dangers of the self. He embodies the eternal lesson of the esoteric path, that forces beyond human comprehension are never neutral, and that to summon them without preparation is to risk everything, visible and invisible. The Mass of the Phoenix. Fire, sacrifice, and rebirth. Among the most enigmatic and potent rituals in modern ceremonial magic lies the Mass of the Phoenix, a rite formulated by Aleister Crowley and preserved as part of the Thelemic corpus. Unlike the public drama of the Gnostic Mass, the Mass of the Phoenix is deeply solitary, intensely personal, and designed to fuse the practitioner with the principle of death and rebirth. It is not a ritual of comfort, but one of radical transformation, demanding the magician confront the fires within themselves. At the heart of the Mass of the Phoenix is the symbol of the phoenix, the mythical bird that burns in its own flames only to rise renewed from its ashes. Across cultures, the phoenix has represented cycles of destruction and regeneration. In Egypt, Persia, and Greece, it embodied eternal renewal. For Crowley, the phoenix became a mirror of the magician's path, to undergo symbolic death, to sacrifice the old self, and to be reborn into a higher, purified state of consciousness. The ritual is composed of several symbolic and physical elements. The consecration of the cake of light, a small wafer or cake, sometimes mixed with bodily fluids, representing the magician's offering. Blood inscription. The magician pricks their skin, marking the cake of light with their blood, infusing the ritual with life force and personal sacrifice. Invocation and sacrifice. The practitioner proclaims words of destruction and renewal, offering themselves metaphorically as the phoenix to the fire. Consumption. By eating the consecrated cake of light, the magician completes the cycle of symbolic death and internal rebirth. This fusion of the symbolic and the physical is precisely what makes the Mass of the Phoenix so perilous. The act of inscribing one's own blood upon the sacrament is not merely dramatic. It is an intimate confrontation with mortality and vitality, with life and its surrender. For some, this ritual brings profound liberation, a cleansing of ego, the death of the old self, and the emergence of a new consciousness aligned with divine will. Yet for others, the ritual's intensity can fracture the psyche. The symbolic death may tip into obsession with mortality, self-harm, or existential despair. The fire that purifies can also consume, leaving the practitioner psychologically unstable. Crowley himself noted the dual nature of this rite. It is transformative for the prepared, catastrophic for the unready. Psychologically, the Mass of the Phoenix operates as a trial by fire. It forces the magician to confront fears, attachments, and limitations with no external support. Unlike communal rituals, where others provide grounding, the solitary nature of this rite leaves the practitioner alone to face the fire within. For this reason, it is often described in esoteric circles as a rite for the experienced, one whose metaphorical and literal intensity demands both courage and preparation. Spiritually, the Mass of the Phoenix is a lesson in impermanence and surrender. By identifying with the Phoenix, the practitioner symbolically abandons their ego, attachments, and illusions of control. In this, the ritual reflects a universal mystical principle. True transformation requires sacrifice, and illumination is inseparable from annihilation. For the modern reader or practitioner, the Mass of the Phoenix serves as both inspiration and warning. It demonstrates that ritual is not entertainment, and that the pursuit of spiritual ascension is not free of peril. The rite embodies a paradox, that the act which promises the greatest illumination can, without proper preparation, lead to the deepest psychological and spiritual turmoil. In contemplating the mass of the phoenix, one comes to understand a truth shared across esoteric traditions. The forces we seek to invoke for knowledge or power are rarely neutral. They demand respect, discipline, and humility. The phoenix is a guide and a caution. Its flames illuminate, but they also consume. Thus, the Mass of the Phoenix remains one of the most profound and dangerous rituals of Crowley's system, a solitary passage into fire, blood, and rebirth, whose lessons extend far beyond ceremonial practice into the very understanding of mortality, identity, and the soul's potential for transformation. The ritual of Abramelin. Knowledge, conversation, and the abyss of the self. Among the most formidable and feared operations in Western esotericism lies the ritual of Abramelin, preserved in the 15th century manuscript attributed to Abraham von Worms. Unlike shorter conjurations or symbolic rites, this ritual is not a single-night ceremony. It is a prolonged spiritual odyssey, demanding months of preparation, moral discipline, and unwavering focus. Its ultimate aim is to achieve the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, a mystical union that grants guidance, protection, and spiritual authority over both mundane and spiritual realms. The Abramelin operation is as demanding as it is profound. The practitioner must enter seclusion, adhere to a strict schedule of prayers, fasting, and purification, and abstain from worldly indulgences. This is not a ritual for casual curiosity. It is a lifetime-altering commitment, a covenant with the divine that leaves no room for half-heartedness. Failure, the texts warn, is catastrophic. Incomplete observance or lack of moral integrity can expose the practitioner to the very forces they seek to command, often resulting in obsession, illness, or psychological collapse. Historically, the ritual's origins lie in a Jewish mystical tradition. Abraham von Worms claims to have received the knowledge from an Egyptian sage named Abramelin, who imparted secrets of spiritual authority and angelic communication. Translated into English in the 19th century by S.L. MacGregor Mathers, it became a cornerstone for modern ceremonial magic, influencing the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley. In these traditions, the ritual represents the apex of magical practice, a disciplined ascent that culminates in both divine encounter and personal transformation. The core of the ritual involves the invocation of the Holy Guardian Angel, whose purpose is to guide the practitioner through the spiritual hierarchy and grant dominion over spirits, including the four kings of hell, Orions, Amaymon, Paimon, and Aegeon. Without the angel's authority, these legions of spirits remain untamed and potentially destructive. The practitioner is warned that attempting to summon them without preparation is tantamount to opening a door into chaos, where forces far older and more intelligent than the human mind await. Aleister Crowley's personal attempts at the Abramelin operation illustrate both its power and peril. During his stay at Boleskine House in Scotland, he reportedly began the ritual, but abandoned it midway due to the practical demands of life and organizational obligations. Folklore holds that disturbances plagued the estate thereafter: strange occurrences, psychological distress, and reports of apparitions. Whether literal or symbolic, these accounts underline the ritual's enduring reputation as a threshold into forces beyond ordinary comprehension. The psychological dimension of the Abramelin operation is as intense as its spiritual requirements. Months of isolation, repeated prayers, and fasting challenge not only the body, but the mind. The practitioner confronts temptation, despair, and inner turmoil, all amplified by ritual expectation and spiritual intensity. Visions and disturbances often occur long before the final invocation, testing the magician's endurance. Those who falter midway may experience residual spiritual or psychological effects, illustrating that the operation is not merely ceremonial, but transformative, for better or worse. The Abramelin ritual embodies a central paradox of esoteric practice. The power it promises is matched by the danger it entails. Mastery of spirits, divine communion, and spiritual authority are attainable, but only through absolute dedication, moral clarity, and preparation. Incomplete practice does not merely fail, it exposes the practitioner to the very forces intended to be subdued, leaving them vulnerable to obsession, influence, or destruction. The enduring lesson of the Abramelin operation is clear. Esoteric mastery is inseparable from personal integrity, spiritual preparation, and respect for the unseen. The ritual does not merely grant power, it tests the practitioner to their core. Those who succeed achieve transformation and guidance. Those who fail risk devastation. The text is a testament to the gravity of human engagement with the spiritual realm, a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed lightly. In contemplating the Abramelin ritual, one comes to understand a broader esoteric truth. The pursuit of spiritual knowledge and power is inseparable from the responsibility to wield it wisely and the dangers inherent in neglecting preparation, discipline, and moral fortitude are as real as the mystical rewards. It is no exaggeration to call the Abramelin operation one of the most terrifying and exacting spiritual undertakings in Western magical tradition, and a rite whose wisdom has been preserved across centuries primarily as a warning to the unwary. Gothic summoning and infernal pacts. The bargains of the abyss. If there is one area of esoteric practice that has inspired awe, dread, and countless cautionary tales, it is Gothic summoning, the conjuration of spirits detailed in the Ars Goetia, the first section of the Lemegeton, or Lesser Key of Solomon. This grimoire catalogues 72 spirits, each with its own rank, abilities, and sigils. Unlike angelic rites or protective ceremonies, Gothic summoning plunges directly into the infernal hierarchy, demanding courage, precision, and a depth of spiritual authority few mortals possess. The Goetia describes a hierarchy reminiscent of earthly monarchies: kings, dukes, princes, marquises, counts, and presidents of hell, each commanding legions of subordinate spirits. These entities are not benign guides, but forces of immense power and cunning. They are bound, according to tradition, by Solomon himself, compelled to obey through divine authority and the use of sacred names. However, their obedience is always conditional. The magician must assert authority with skill, discipline, and protection. Any lapse can invite catastrophe. Central to Gothic practice are the sigils, intricate symbols that encode the essence and authority of each spirit. To summon a spirit is to draw their seal, to recite their conjuration, and to stand within a protective circle, often accompanied by the recitation of divine names. The circle is not a mere decoration. It is a boundary between the human and the infernal, a fragile barrier that protects the practitioner from harm. Even with such precautions, the risk remains profound. Spirits may deceive, manipulate, or, if angered, strike directly at the magician's mind, body, or fortune. Beyond summoning lies the concept of infernal pacts. A pact is a binding agreement between the magician and the spirit, often sealed symbolically with blood or other offerings. In exchange for obedience, knowledge, wealth, or influence, the practitioner surrenders something of value, sometimes their morality, their ambition, or, according to legend, their soul. Historical grimoires, such as the Grand Grimoire and Grimorium Verum, provide instructions on negotiating these pacts, emphasizing both the potency and danger inherent in such arrangements. The spirits of the Gutia are not uniform in nature. Some offer knowledge of sciences, secrets of the past and future, or the manipulation of human affairs. Others grant influence over emotions, desire, and conflict. The most feared, such as Belial, Asmodeus, Baal, and Astaroth, combine immense knowledge with the capacity for deception and corruption. Even when a request is granted, the consequences are rarely neutral. Blessings are accompanied by burdens, and gains often carry unforeseen costs. Historical and folkloric accounts underscore these dangers. European tales abound with sorcerers who summoned a spirit successfully but failed to dismiss it properly, resulting in obsession, madness, or violent death. The story of Dr. Faust, though literary, embodies the archetypal consequences of a failed infernal bargain, knowledge and power at the expense of eternal damnation. Occult circles whisper of those who attempted Goetic summoning with insufficient preparation, only to be consumed by the very forces they sought to command. Psychologically, the Goetic spirits are mirrors of the practitioner's deepest desires and fears. Summoning Asmodeus, for instance, may awaken uncontrollable lust or anger. Working with mnemonic spirits may incite destructive greed. Invoking Belial may destabilize moral and ethical boundaries. In this sense, the ritual is dangerous even without literal belief in the spirits themselves. It is a confrontation with shadow, a test of discipline, and an exposure of the mind to archetypal forces that few can endure unscathed. Yet the allure of Goetic magic persists. The promise of immediate, tangible results, wealth, influence, knowledge, and control tempts even the cautious. Unlike angelic or Qliphotic practices, which may require months or years of preparation, Goetic summoning can appear deceptively expedient, but the texts are explicit. Without purity, protection, and mastery, the practitioner does not command the spirit commands them. The most feared spirits within the Gutia are often those whose gifts are matched by their ability to corrupt. Belial, known for offering titles and worldly power, is infamous for betrayal and moral decay. Asmodeus, lord of lust and destruction, can obliterate relationships and sanity. Baal confounds perception and judgment. Astaroth, a fallen angel, offers secrets but brings despair. These figures endure across centuries precisely because they remain unconquered, a testament to the persistent peril they represent. Ultimately, the Gutia and its infernal pacts exemplify a universal principle of esotericism. The closer one approaches the sources of immense power, the greater the responsibility and the greater the risk. Knowledge and influence are never free. They demand preparation, discipline, and moral clarity. To ignore these requirements is to invite ruin, both visible and invisible. In contemplating the Goetic spirits, one comes to understand a broader esoteric truth. The most terrible forces are often those that mirror the human condition itself. Desire, ambition, lust, and greed, amplified through ritual, become entities of their own, independent, intelligent, and often hostile. Goetic summoning is therefore not a game nor a casual experiment, but a profound engagement with the abyss, a test of the magician's courage discipline, and moral fortitude. Conclusion: spirits beyond the circle, having traversed the labyrinth of esoteric rites, conjurations, and infernal hierarchies, the seeker now arrives at a place of reflection. We have witnessed the terrifying expanse of spiritual practice, from the Headless Rite, through the disorienting abyss of Choronzon, the inverted spheres of the Qliphoth, the cunning of Lucifuge, Rofocale, the transformative fire of the mass of the Phoenix, the disciplined odyssey of the ritual of Abramelin, and finally, the perilous bargains of Goetic summoning. Each rite, each spirit, each practice represents a threshold, a confrontation with forces that test not only skill, but the very fabric of the practitioner's being. Yet even this catalogue is incomplete. Across cultures, history, and mysticism, countless other spirits remain unnamed, whispering warnings through folklore, grimoires, and oral tradition. Some, like Pazuzu, hail from Mesopotamian demonology, bringing famine, disease, and destruction. Others, like Asmodeus, inhabit Jewish and Christian traditions, embodying lust, wrath, and chaos. Astaroth and Belial remind us of the seductive power of knowledge, ambition, and moral compromise. Together, these spirits constitute a map of caution, a testament to the enduring principle that the spiritual and psychological realms are inseparable, and that ambition without preparation invites catastrophe. Among the most sobering lessons is the understanding that some of the most terrifying spirits are not those who strike with fire or malice, but those who mirror our own shadow. Choronzon dissolves identity. The Qliphoth reflect internal corruption. Lucifuge Rofocale manipulates desire. Goetic spirits magnify ambition and greed. They reveal, in stark clarity, that the dangers of esotericism are not merely external, but deeply internal. To summon without preparation is to summon the ungoverned aspects of the self. The repeated warnings across centuries, languages, and traditions are not coincidental. Hermetic texts, Kabbalistic manuscripts, Islamic esoteric sources, and European grimoires all stress one principle: human beings are fragile vessels in the presence of forces beyond comprehension. Even the most disciplined practitioner must approach with humility, reverence, and profound awareness of consequence. To assume control where one lacks authority is to invite ruin. Modern seekers often gaze upon these rites with curiosity, enticed by the promise of power, insight, or immortality. But the wisdom preserved by ancient masters is clear. The names of spirits such as Choronzon, Belial, Astaroth, Asmodeus, Lucifuge, and Pazuzu are not ornamental. They are cautionary markers, warnings encoded in language, ritual, and story, designed to prevent the unprepared from stepping beyond the boundaries of safety. Some forces may offer knowledge or favors, but nothing comes without cost. The Goetic kings, the infernal ministers, the Qliphotic husks, the Phoenix's flames, all demand respect, discipline, and moral integrity. To bypass these requirements is to risk obsession, despair, psychological collapse, or worse. The line between summoner and summoned is thin. Crossing it without readiness often leaves the practitioner irrevocably changed, haunted, or destroyed. In the end, the most terrible spirit one should never invoke is not a single entity, but the aggregate shadow of all these forces, the reflection of human desire, ambition, fear, and hubris, amplified through ritual and contact with the unseen. They teach a profound truth. True esoteric practice is not about dominion over spirits or acquisition of power, but about humility, preparation, self-knowledge, and respect for forces beyond human comprehension. Let the names remain unspoken in practice, preserved in texts as warnings rather than invitations. Let Choronzon dwell in the abyss. The Qliphoth remain husks beyond the tree of life. Lucifuge, Rofocale guard his treasures, and Gothic spirits remain bound under divine authority. To approach them unprepared is to awaken not only external entities, but the abyss within, and once awakened, the abyss does not easily release its prey. Thus concludes our journey through the most terrible spirits you should never invoke. The essay serves as both meditation and caution, a map of shadowed realms, and a reminder that the path of spiritual ascent is inseparable from discernment, discipline, and respect for the unseen forces that have tested, guided, and warned humanity for millennia. And if you liked the talk, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.